How can a few key strategies transform your daily interactions with a loved one with dementia into meaningful and positive experiences? Today, my guest is Dr. Natali Edmonds, a board certified geropsychologist who has dedicated over 13 years to this field. Her journey is not just professional, but deeply personal, driven by her own experiences and the countless caregivers she has supported along the way. Dr. Natali Edmonds is the founder of Dementia Careblazers, a company offering 24/7 support to caregivers. Aiming to tackle the challenges and loneliness often faced in this role, her expertise extends beyond individual caregivers to consulting for long-term care and assisted living facilities. Recognized nationally, Natali's company was named the 2022 Caregiving Organization of the Year by Care.com. She also hosts the #1 dementia training channel on YouTube, which has garnered over 16 million views worldwide. In our conversation, we'll explore Dr. Natali's journey into geropsychology, her motivations for founding Dementia Careblazers, and her insights into the pressing needs of family caregivers. We talk all about dementia and practical strategies for positive engagement, so you will be supported in your care. Natali shares valuable resources for caregiver support and her vision for the future of dementia care. Thank you, Dr. Natali, for sharing your knowledge with us and the wonderful work you do to support caregivers. Here is my interview with Dr. Natali Edmonds. Dr. Natali Edmonds, we finally get to meet. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here.
I am so excited to be here.
This is going to be so good. And I know I was looking at the breadth of your work, which is so amazing. The amount of lives and people that you touch, right? 15 million views on YouTube. And that doesn't even cover all the social media and all the other ways that you impact family. So your reach is so important and so vital for all of us. And we could go in a million directions with this conversation, but we're going to focus on strategies for positive engagement, touch on some other things. I know the conversation's going to be rich and people will learn. So I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So tell us a little bit about you, your journey into geropsychology. What inspired you to want to specialize in dementia care?
So I got started, going through graduate school. That's like your time to try to explore a bunch of different options. You do a bunch of different rotations and clinical experiences. And one of my very first clinical experiences was actually a place called the Arizona State Hospital. And I worked on the forensic side. So I worked with people who were determined by the court of law to be guilty except insane. So they had all murdered somebody, but instead of going to prison, they went to the state hospital. And this was like one of my very first clinical experiences. And one of the treatment modalities we would do would be support groups. And there was always one person in that support group who was older significantly than all the rest. And it always felt like he was just kind of left out, not really engaging. He just always stood out to me. And that was my very first kind of seed planted in terms of what's different about him compared to all the rest.
Mm.
And, he walked slower, he talked slower. I'm not quite sure his hearing was great. And he always sat in the back. And it just always felt like we weren't reaching him or we were missing him. So that was like the first seed that made me think I want to specialize more in working with older adults and see how we can help them better. So I just started tailoring a lot of my clinical experiences to working with older adults and took a fellowship at one of the only APA accredited fellowships in the country, which was in Pittsburgh at the VA hospital there. And I got amazing training by amazing geriatricians, geropsychologists, geriatric psychiatrists, neurologists. And I just fell so in love with this population. And mostly because there was such a need and there weren't very many people who wanted to go in the field. And so my start was from purely professional reasons. And it wasn't until more recently that it started to hit me personally. And then I was able to develop a compassion and awareness that no amount of training could have ever prepared me for.
I know I've been following along a little bit because it's with your dad, right? So can
Yes.
you share a little bit about that? And
Sure. It was first with my mom, and she passed away in June 2022. And
yeah.
both of them are similar in terms of alcohol being a primary factor for their cognitive impairment. My mom had a pretty medically complex and quick death, I would say, like about a year and a half from knowing, okay, cognitive issues are present. She would get delirium a lot from high ammonia levels. She was passed away within that time. My dad has been much more of a slower, gradual journey. And it's just been hard personally because now I'm no longer the professional, like giving the help and advice. I'm on the other side and I get to see just, how complicated the system is to navigate, how much help isn't given, how long you have to wait to try to get the help, and how many hoops you have to jump through and complications just to qualify for certain services. It's amazing. And I'm in the field, so like I understand, I feel like quite a lot, but it's still so confusing and overwhelming. I couldn't imagine the majority of people how they get through it.
I know it's so lonely. And I experience that as well, not only on the family side, but professional side. And I think that too, I'm like, I have a background in trying to navigate this. I cannot imagine. And it's still complex for me. And then when it's personal and you've got emotion and love and challenge and all of the different dynamics with that, it just makes it that much more complex. Yeah.
Totally.
There is so much we can learn from other people's story and how we absorb that and in many different ways. And the support systems are so important and vital as we're walking through all of this. So Dementia Careblazers is how you do that. And how did you decide to start something very specific, moving away from your hospital work to more hands-on?
So I had the idea, I wasn't quite clear on the idea, but I had an idea that I wanted to do more to help people with dementia and family members. And I had a lot of my career in the hospital was doing the testing and the diagnosis to determine whether somebody had dementia. And I was a part of an amazing team. We really just true heartfelt professionals. We'd all come together and we would sit around a table and we would tell the family for the very first time ever, yes, we think your loved one has Alzheimer's disease or frontal temporal dementia. And here's the results of our evaluation. And here are our recommendations. And just because of the barriers and limitations of working in the healthcare setting, we would then tell them, and we'll see you in 6 months to a year. And I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like they're about to have so many questions and need so much support and see so many strange symptoms and things start to develop. Where are they going to turn to? So I had this idea, but I was scared and I've been at this for a while. So this was before social media was like a big thing. And it's totally not normal for healthcare professionals to go online. And I was scared to do anything. And I took a transfer because I wanted to help more caregivers more personally. So I took a transfer from the assessment clinic to something called home-based primary care, which meant I was part of a team that we would travel to their homes. So rather than make them come to the hospital to see me, I was a team that got to go see them in their home, see their family members, how they lived, and offer therapy support and assessment in their home environment, which was so rewarding. And as part of that, you get issued a hospital vehicle and you drive around the city of Phoenix. And I was leaving a patient's home and I was driving back to the hospital and I got T-boned, a serious T-bone, airbags deployed, fire, ambulance came. It
Yeah.
was just like a huge wake up call for me. And I just decided this life is short. What am I doing? I'm scared to help caregivers. Get over yourself, Natali. Like, why don't you let your desire to help people be bigger than your fear? And
Mm.
so I literally took out my cell phone and I recorded the very first video. I just started listening to the most common questions I was asked, what caregivers were asking me, what patients were struggling with. And I just started talking into my phone and answering the questions. And I started posting them on YouTube because I was like, oh, I think maybe this is something that would work.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any idea what it was going to be, what it would turn into, but it turned out people were looking for information online, and that's how this whole thing got started.
Wow. Okay, that's a lesson we all need to learn is that don't let fear be greater than our purpose, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
So important. There's for people listening that don't quite know what is a geropsychologist. Did I say that right? Geropsychologist.
You've got it.
There we
Yep.
go.
It's a geropsychologist. There's not very many of us in the country. So it's a clinical psychologist background. So clinical psychologists, you typically have a PhD or a PsyD, doctorate in psychology, and then you go on and you get specialization in geriatrics, meaning you specialize in dementia, issues related to older adults, and helping support their family members. So in 2015, 15, I got board certified in geropsychology.
Okay, that's so helpful because we hear these terms and right as families and we're not as familiar. I think it's so helpful to understand like, okay, the background and all of that. So
Absolutely. It's like anything that has
yeah.
to do with emotions or brain, that's kind of where we come in.
Yes, yes. And so needed. And like you said, the demand is so high and there's not enough in the field. I have questions about that later too. But from your perspective, you said when you pulled out your phone and you just started answering those questions for families, what do you feel are some of those most common misconceptions about dementia for families, for caregivers, or not even or, in addition to that, some of those, yeah, big questions that we have.
I think a lot of confusion is around initially, like in the very beginning stages. Well, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? That's like one of the biggest, most common questions I get asked. There's a lot of confusion thinking that dementia means you have to have memory impairment and that it's obvious, but that's not always the case. And memory impairment is not a requirement to meet a criteria for dementia. I also think a lot of questions come up just around symptoms. So we have the symptoms that go into a diagnosis of any type of dementia, but then there's all these other symptoms that family members face that aren't necessarily front and center talked about. Like, why does the person with dementia only seem to hate me or do bad with me? Or why do they seem to be accusing me of things that aren't true? Or why do they seem like they don't want help? And a lot of times, those aren't the things that are getting talked about in a short, quick visit. And so that's what they're turning to a lot of these videos for to realize, oh, this is something people experience. It's okay that I'm seeing this. It doesn't mean that they've got the diagnosis wrong. Like sometimes family will say, well, some days they're okay and some days they're not, or some moments they remember and some moments they don't. And they think, did the diagnosis get wrong? What's happening? So I think that's a lot of what's going
Yeah.
on. But another important piece is just family members realizing that, the average primary care appointment is about 15 minutes long. And so that's not enough to get your answers, your questions answered. And so families are starting to realize, even though it feels strange for them, they're starting more and more to turn to other avenues to get some of this basic information. And that's why I think we see such a growth on social media of family members trying to augment what they're hearing in healthcare appointments with other things they can learn online.
Right. Yeah, there's just not enough time. And I think too, our questions are ongoing, right? Each day might change, things come up. We need to be able to figure out how do we do all of this. And I was looking again at all the information. I'm like, oh my word, it's like every question I've ever had as a as a family member. And some I didn't even think about, but I'd love to know about. My grandma lived with us. She moved into our home when I was 15. And so we cared for her. And we had so many questions, and social media wasn't available at the time. We just were left with just a lot of questions and no answers. And then we felt like no one else my age had anyone else older living with them. You kind of feel like you're this lone, I don't know, person out there. So it is so helpful. And I like that you're able to see all of the resource and all of the really, really practical, real questions that we have that we need to navigate. So thankful.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that was really important to me too in the beginning was being able to provide the information and answers in a simple and clear way that's easy to understand. Because it's hard when somebody is trying to help you, like traditionally the way that we talk a lot in healthcare. It's so confusing and we're using acronyms and words that aren't necessarily, it's not like the people can't understand them. But when our emotions are high and we're overwhelmed, it's like, can you just tell me very simply what this answer is or what I need to do? And so that's another thing that's really important to us whenever we're talking about concepts and answering questions online.
Oh, yeah. We all have different backgrounds, lived experiences, education, communication, right? So if we can't find that in a place where it is simple, digestible, we're going to be like, this is too much. I don't have the time, right? Or the energy to try to absorb that when I've got so much going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. In addition to misconceptions, what are you seeing as the most pressing needs for families? in your practice. And I really love how you focus on the dual side of not only the person living with dementia, but equally the caregiver, right? And the importance of that.
Yeah, and I'd say that's pretty much the big thing missing. A lot of times when we're talking about dementia care, we're focused on the person with dementia, on their symptoms, what we can do to stop, reduce, prevent, minimize those symptoms. But what we're not doing enough is helping the family member or the caregiver feel confident, equipped in their ability to perform these things and do these approaches. I feel like sometimes the way many of us give all these recommendations to caregivers, it's as if we're treating them like some robot that they could just do everything and they don't need any care or they don't need any training or they don't need any support. And that's not the case. And I firmly believe that we cannot do justice and make this world dementia friendly if we don't make it caregiver friendly. But I think it's important too. We can't just say the niceties and cheer them on and support them. That's great. That's a great start, but we also have to show them and teach them and help them embody what it's like to keep showing up for your loved one day after day when you feel like you want to break down or you're feeling overwhelmed or you're not even looking forward to the next day. So that's the part I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, I know. That is it, it's like that. We can't always have that lens of what's the term, like toxic positivity or
Yes.
right, that Pollyanna approach. It's like, while we do want to obviously um, speak kindly to ourselves in it, we also have to acknowledge that this is really hard and there's challenge with that. So how do we do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and it's like, well, this is real world. Like we could say all the nice things we want, but what are we going to do when you haven't slept, you haven't had a good night's sleep, your loved one's saying mean things to you, nobody's helping you? It's like, how do you get through that? And a lot of it is teaching core principles that we know as clinical psychologists called cognitive behavioral therapy, but how we talk to ourselves is incredibly important. And it's not talking to ourselves in sentences that sound pretty, like, you can do this, come on. That's fine if it works for you, but it's literally making sure the thoughts you're having that you actually believe them and they're moving you closer to an end result you feel better about. Like
Mm,
our thoughts fuel our feelings. We often think it's a situation that causes our feelings. This is how we're kind of taught from grade school. That's not the way it works. It's always our thinking that fuels our feelings. And so teaching caregivers to be aware of what's going through their mind, aware of how that's creating their feeling, and
mm,
then if they want to, teaching them how to change that feeling. And I say if they want to, because having grief and loss and sadness and heartbreak and frustration, all of that is totally valid too. We don't, feelings aren't something that need to be fixed all the times. Sometimes they just need to be felt. And actually teaching caregivers how you can feel through emotions is incredibly helpful too, because you're going to feel a broad range of emotions throughout your whole human life, not even just for caregivers. And so teaching them you've gotten through all of these emotions in the past. Every single feeling you have is temporary, but how do you want to treat yourself through these feelings? How do you want to experience those feelings? And how do you make sure that when those feelings come up, we're not digging a hole deeper for ourselves because we're turning to things like numbing ourselves out or opening the freezer drawer and eating the gallon of ice cream or turning to the bottle of wine or online shopping? All of those things we all have a tendency to do. It's just raising the awareness of this is how we're doing it. We're not negatively judging ourselves through it, but this is a choice and we can choose this at some times, but we can also choose a different way. And let's talk about how that different way would look and how do you practice that in real life. And that's just basic stuff that never gets attention or talked about.
Oh, especially in the caregiving world, and I wrote that down. I love that so much. Our feelings don't need to be fixed, right? They need to be felt. And the importance of talking to ourselves like we're someone we care about. You shared about that, which is so, it made me think of this conversation I had with one of my best childhood friends. And I was talking about something. I was not talking very kindly about myself, self-admittedly. And she was like, Nicole Ann, which is my middle name. She's like, be kind to my friend. Be kind to my
Oh,
friend. And it was like at that enough of like a perspective shift for me that when now it's like if I'm thinking through something, I honestly remember that. I'm like, okay, be kind to my friend.
I love that. What a good friend. And I love that perspective. It's sometimes I think that if we said out loud to people we cared
Mhm.
about what we say to ourselves in our head, we would have no friends. And if people said that to us, we would not want them as friends. Yet we walk around every day saying these things inside of our own heads. And a lot of it's just repetition and habit. But we can stop that. We can change it and we can actually talk to ourselves like we're somebody we care about, which is such a novel idea, I know.
I know, I just got goosebumps. Yeah, so good. So with that same, I don't know, with that same framework, what's helpful to say, I don't know, to caregivers, to ourselves, in our life? And then on the other side of that, what's not helpful? Is there this kind of like guideline a little bit if we're reaching for ways to support people and ourselves?
Sure. And everybody's different and has different preferences. But one of the easy ways that people can do this is just to imagine somebody you truly love and care about. So like for your friend, she may imagine you, but maybe you're imagining a child, your best friend, somebody you just care about deeply. And imagine that they are coming to you in the same exact situation you are in, and they are sharing the same exact struggles and challenges that you are in. Now, what would you say to them? I guarantee you would not say, well, you should know better by now, or you should be ashamed of yourself, or you're still making that mistake. You've been doing that for much too long, or you're a horrible care. We would never, ever think about saying that to somebody we love and we care about. And it's so much easier for us to realize that when we're thinking and talking about another person. But now, when you imagine the scenario, you just have to say, okay, well, then say those same words to myself. What
Yeah.
would you say to somebody you love? And then practice saying that to yourself.
So true. And that you had mentioned this before. The first piece of that is the awareness of it, that we even do it, right?
Yes, and sometimes that can be hard, like the very first part, because we so much live our life in like a habit on autopilot, and we don't even realize that these thoughts are happening. And so, one of the very first things that we can realize is or notice is whenever there's a shift in your mood. When there's a significant shift in your mood, either for the worse or for the better, those are great opportunities to pause and say, what just went through my mind? And start to make that connection. Oh, I just had the thought that I'm a horrible caregiver, or I just had the thought that I love having this friend in my life. And then you'll start to notice that it's actually those thoughts impacting your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, such a good reminder. With all of these different, that's like such a great strategy for like how we talk to ourselves. There are other strategies for positive engagement and talking through those modalities and perspectives. I'd love for you to walk us through your insight on that. What are you seeing? How can we learn from what you know?
So we could probably spend all day on this topic
Yeah.
and come up with 100 different ideas. But I really tried to think through like what are three simple core ideas people can remind themselves of to have more positive engagement in their life with their loved one. And one of the most important ones, I think, is to notice and manage our thoughts about our loved ones in particular. So
Mm,
we're there's no judgment on thoughts. We're going to have all kinds of thoughts, and I'll give a metaphor on how we can work through them here in a minute. But a lot of times, because we're caring for loved ones who have been in our life for many years, and because we all have history with one another, it's so easy that when something hard comes up, for us to maybe think thoughts like they've always been this way, they're doing it on purpose, they've always been a difficult person. Sometimes people will write to me and say they're narcissistic. And just to realize that every single time you have a thought like that about your loved one, notice what it does to you. It's
mm,
going to make you feel resentful, angry, frustrated. You're not going to show up in a great way for positive engagement with your loved one having those thoughts. Now, it doesn't mean we can make those thoughts disappear. We're going to have all kinds of thoughts. We're human. It's okay. Plus, we have the negativity bias, which means our thoughts are naturally going to be more negative than positive. No issue or problem there. But we do have to practice what are some good thoughts about our loved one. And this can be hard in the beginning. And sometimes I will teach people, like, hey, maybe your good thought about them is that they ate their food today. Or
mm,
if we have to get even like more creative, you can have a good thought about them that you're so happy they have fingernails. I mean, honestly, we could just like get very simple and basic. Like we have to train our brains to start to look for the good because our brains also have something called the confirmation bias, which means it will show you what you're looking for, and it will confirm what you believe to be true. And so we have positivity journals and practices because we need more help doing that. But it really is going to be manage your thoughts about your loved one. It has nothing to do with giving your loved one, like giving them a break or cutting them off or giving them the easy way out. It's about giving you the easy way out. And I can't think of a harder way to go through the caregiving journey than with feelings of resentment and frustration towards your loved one. So watch your thoughts about your loved one. It's okay if you have those negative ones, but start to balance them out with what are some good things I can think about my loved one today. And maybe it's the color of their sweater and how it brings out their eyes. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, the practice of that. And it really is. It's like shifting because it takes time to change how we've always spoke to not only ourselves but our loved ones in our heads. If they could hear what we're thinking, it would just be something else.
Yeah. And one of the practices I like sharing is this concept of the thought buffet. And so when you think about going to a buffet restaurant and they have all these food options, I don't know, what's a food you really don't like?
Oh, what's a food I don't like? Chicken right now. I can't eat chicken.
Okay, perfect. So it's like you go to a buffet, there's going to be chicken on there, right? You're not going to call over the manager and be like, oh my gosh, why is there chicken on here? This is horrible. I demand the chicken's gone. You're not even going to pick up the chicken and put it on your plate. It
Right.
doesn't make any sense, let alone you're not going to eat it. But when it comes to our thoughts, those negative ones that make us feel the worst, it's as if we're going up on this buffet and it's like, I will have a plate full of chicken, please. Give me all the chicken I can eat, knowing that it's just making us sick when there's right next to it, like French fries, and you can have French fries or salad or whatever food you do like. And that's how our thoughts are. We're going to have negative thoughts, we're going to have positive thoughts. They're all going to be there, they're all options. And every now and then, we're going to pick up a thought that we forgot we didn't like. And we're going to take a couple bites, but noticing it and then realizing, you know what? There's other thoughts here I can choose from. Let me just go pick up a new plate. It's a never ending buffet, and I'm going to practice this new thought. It's ongoing. The buffet never closes down, but it's just a nice metaphor and practice to realize you're not doing it wrong when the negative thoughts pop up. Those options are just always there. It's just we have to be mindful about going back up there and choosing something that sits better with us.
I love that visual. That is something we can remember so well. So, what are those other strategies? Okay, so we went through notice and acknowledging thoughts.
Yes, manage your thoughts about them. Another thing would be to put your relationship with your loved one first.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy for caregiving to take over. And we want to keep them safe, we want to keep them clean and healthy. But as dementia progresses, the chances of them developing something called anosognosia, which means total lack of awareness, the chances of them developing this condition increases. Over 80% of people with some type of dementia will develop this condition, which to you and me is going to look like denial.
Yeah.
They might not think they need the help, they might think they're okay. And so when we are trying to help them in the way we perceive as helping them, it might come across as treating them like a child, treating them like a baby, trying to boss them around. It's going to hurt the relationship and it's not going to be great for positive engagement. So, one of the things we want to do is just always be thinking, how can I put the relationship first? What would be great for the relationship? And so, some of the concepts I think about here are not highlighting the fact that they need help. So, if they're wearing a stained shirt, we don't necessarily need to say, your shirt's dirty, let's change it. I work with one care blazer and she always offers her husband a back scratch. Do you want a back scratch? And he loves them. And so she takes off his shirt, scratches his back, and then just gives him a new shirt. She doesn't even mention that the shirt's dirty. And so that's like a beautiful example of how do we put the relationship first and how do we do things every single day that don't take up any extra time, but just foster the relationship together. Things like offering them a genuine compliment, asking for their help with something, whether or not you need their help, just helping them feel like they contribute, like they're meaningful. Even asking for their opinion on something can be so simple, but when do people do this? We sometimes just kind of take over everything and miss out on those connections. So I think that's incredibly important for people to do. Um, and none of that has to cost any extra time or money, but it's It's the relationship first. And when we think about a situation where maybe we need help with things we don't want help with, or
Mhm.
maybe we're in a situation that's scary or confusing or distressing, they're going to be much more likely to accept your help if
Mhm.
they know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
And like, so if we think about it, if my worst enemy tried to come help me with something intimate, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to be like, I don't care what you're saying. I don't care. Like, get away from me. But
Yeah.
if it was my best friend, even if I didn't understand everything, I'd be more likely to go along with them. But the problem is when we let caregiving take over too much and everything is about what they can't do, highlighting that they need help, reminding them they have a diagnosis, it starts to wear away at the relationship and it's going to make it less likely that they're going to accept your help with anything.
Oh my word. Yeah. So helpful. When you said, yeah, I would never let someone help me change my clothes if we did not have a good relationship. I would be like, no, thank you.
Exactly.
Get out of here. Yeah.
And it's all like I want every caregiver to know too who's listening, it's never too late. It,
Mm.
it, it only takes one person to repair a relationship. I call it like revive the relationship when you're caring for somebody with dementia. And that one person is you. And it starts with these little things every day. Do something every day that doesn't involve caregiving. Give them a compliment, do something that you know they would enjoy. Just treating them like a real human being um, goes so far and I think is undervalued.
Yeah, I love that point. It takes one person to repair the relationship. It does when you add that softness in there. I also remember reading from what you had shared about approach the person, not the diagnosis. Does that statement live within this framework as
Ab-
well?
Absolutely. We are first and foremost dealing with human beings. And so treating them like a human being is going to get you so much more further than treating them like a diagnosis. And even five people at the same exact age with the same exact diagnosis, they're going to require different approaches. They all have different preferences, different desires, different personalities. And so when we keep the person first and foremost, we'll have much more success in being able to find ways that connect with them, that they'll enjoy. I sometimes like to think about, well, who was this person or in their earlier years? What did they enjoy doing? What did they love? And how can I bring that into their life now? How can I ask them questions about it? Sometimes simply asking things like, how did you get to be so good at this? Where did you learn this? Tell me more about this. Have them teach you something, like all of these things. You're just making a human to human connection versus the caregiver patient connection, which we know we'll have to do from time to time, but it's about saving those moments for when it's really needed and safety issues are a concern. Everything else we're doing in terms of the human to human connection is helping it make it easier that they'll accept all that help and you can like avoid a lot of that strain.
Yeah, a lot of the conflict. So good. So for the third strategy, those two are so good. So I can't wait to hear what this one is.
Okay, so the third strategy, it's kind of similar to what we've already talked about, but if we're talking about positive engagement with people who have dementia, we cannot do that unless we have positive engagement with ourselves. And so this is where I like to remind caregivers that anything you do that's good for you and good for the relationship is going to be good for the person with dementia. It's going to be have a net positive impact. So this really goes back to what we talked about. How are you talking to yourself? How are you caring about yourself? And I like to remind people there's no amount of beating yourself up that will ever lead to a positive impact on your loved one with dementia. If it did, then I might say there's a room for let's talk about
Yeah.
talking bad about ourselves. Like maybe let's make it happen. But it doesn't. It doesn't change anything about the past. It doesn't help your loved one. If anything, it's going to contribute to your own burnout, your own resentment, your own feelings of discouragement, and it's going to make everything about caregiving so much more difficult. And this is just something that's going to feel awkward in the beginning. It's going to feel unnatural, but all it's going to take is raising your awareness of when you're talking that way to yourself and finding something kinder to say that's truthful. And it is, there's many kind things we can say to ourselves that's truthful. It just doesn't come as easy to us. And so we're building a new muscle, we're building a new habit. But I'd say this is probably the most important thing for positive engagement. It's just making sure you're positively engaging with yourself.
Oh my goodness, so true. And I like that building that new muscle. It is. We have to, if we're not training, right? If you
Yeah.
weightlift training, Or that we won't have the capacity to be able to do that when we need to over and over again. So, how do you suggest we manage some of that stress, be able to make sure that that emotional well-being, I know burnout's a term that we use where we've got some of those things we need to overcome.
Yeah, I think for starters, it's important to know that life is filled with challenges before dementia ever entered the picture, certainly while you're caring for somebody with dementia, and challenges will be present well after dementia leaves your life. And so just acknowledging like this is part of being human. So,
Mhm.
sometimes we get this pressure that when things go wrong, we have to fix it or change it right away, which is going to contribute even more to feelings of burnout because sometimes we can't do anything about the disease progressing. We can't do anything about maybe the insurance companies operating the way they do, the hospitals operating the way they do, at least in the moment. And so, in some cases, just saying out loud, like, this is the way that it is. Sometimes life is hard.
Mhm.
Sometimes, like, there are challenges. Literally, without the pressure of trying to change it, can be helpful. I sometimes use the metaphor of an ocean. And when we think of an ocean, we can picture the calm ocean where we can stand on it and everything's stand in it and everything's very quiet and it's beautiful. But then sometimes the waves come and they push you under and they knock you off your feet and it can feel like you're drowning. But then the ocean always goes back to being the ocean and the calm comes again.
Yeah.
And so sometimes just allowing yourself to get knocked down without making it mean anything negative about you, without making it mean you're doing something wrong, and just acknowledging this is life and sometimes life is hard and I know I will get through it without all of that pressure to run away and resist all of our emotions. It's like holding that beach ball underwater. The more you try to hold it underwater the whole time, eventually it's going to slip. Your arms are going to get tired and it's going to pop up heavier and stronger than ever before. But if you let the discomfort of that beach ball, the emotions just hang out with you for a bit, they will eventually float away. And I think one of the best skills anybody can learn is just how to get comfortable being uncomfortable. How do we deal with the discomfort without making things worse for ourselves?
Mhm.
Sometimes we get sad about situations and then we're even more sad that we're sad, or we're frustrated something happened and then we get frustrated with ourselves that we're frustrated. But if we could just allow ourselves to be human and realize all humans are going to have these emotions and experiences without all of that judgment and negativity and the quickness to try to change it, and we could just feel it knowing you have felt every emotion in your life up until this point, we can make life and caregiving so much truly like an a easier experience. I don't want to say it's easy, but it will become easier because you're getting better and you're building evidence that you can make it through these hard times.
Yeah, yeah, the building evidence. But man, is that uncomfortable to feel uncomfortable. It's like,
Yes.
I just want to, we want to run, like, we want to run away from that feeling so
Ex-
often.
Exactly. But what I like to say a lot is, we've had these feelings of discomfort our whole lives, and nothing has ever been able to get rid of them. There's always a new challenge that's going to come. So if we're going to experience these uncomfortable feelings, probably at least half of our lives, doesn't it make sense that we just start to get familiar with them, acknowledge how they feel, even get curious and observe ourselves? Like sometimes I teach people just observe yourself going through the discomfort. What do you do? What are your thoughts? It's kind of like a step of removal. And sometimes it's just really interesting and entertaining to kind of witness ourselves in that way. But we're going to experience this. So we might as well do it in a way that doesn't tear us down and approach it from an aspect of I want to get through this in the best way possible. It doesn't mean we're going to avoid the discomfort, but it means like, oh, I know this feeling. I know my chest is getting tight right now, and it's hard for me to swallow. This is that anxiety. And sometimes just calling out the emotion, like, this is anxiety, or this is sadness, or this is heartbreak. Something simple as that can help take an intensity of a 8 or a 9 down to a 6 or a 7.
Yes, I have like so many thoughts as you're, I feel like I just had a therapy session, so thank you.
You're welcome.
What I needed. All these, you're right, uncomfortable emotions in life in general, but it's yeah, that we build that resiliency over time. And that's such a good observation of we've experienced all these emotions our whole life.
Yeah.
And yeah, recognizing that. Oh my God.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll say, you sparked it because you mentioned the word resilient, but a lot of times we want to be people who are resilient, or we want to be caregivers who would be considered strong. But
Mhm.
guess what the requirement is to be strong or to be resilient? It means you go through hard times and you go through challenging times and you make it through the other end. Every single positive quality we want to be as a human being has the opposite side that you have to get through. If you want to be a person of faith, it means you have to go through times where things are uncertain. If you want to be a person who is patient, it means you have to go through times where situations may not be happening in the way that you like. And so just realizing it's all a balance and it's all part of the deal and it's all okay, even when it doesn't feel okay.
Yes, yes. I've had this visualization sometimes of when I've been stressed or right things we can't control. I think that's another thing is we want to control everything because then that feels safe. And a lot of aging and caregiving, there's so much loss of control. But almost this, I would visualize myself almost not laying, but sitting in a canoe. You're in a river and there's waves everywhere, kind of like you were talking about with the ocean. That's what sparked my memory of this. And it's like letting go of the oars,
Ah,
just kind of like your hands are open, letting go of the oars, and you will float down the river, right? It's like when we resist or we're trying to do all these things, we just cause so much angst. And it's just such a good, yeah, a good reminder of that. So,
yeah, it's that saying, what you resist persists.
yeah,
Sometimes I'm like, let's say you're on a road trip and you hit a traffic jam. It's like you're not going to make that traffic move any faster, but you have the choice and you're in control of how you want to respond in that moment. Are you going to honk your horn, curse everybody out around you? Are you going to turn on a podcast or listen to some good music and call a friend or something like that? It's those are the things we always have control over.
we do. We do. So you offer so many different resources, and I want to get into that so we can share all about that. But I'm excited to hear your thoughts on how do you see the future of dementia care evolving, and Dementia Careblazers is a huge part of that landscape. What are your thoughts on where are we going? What are you excited about? What are some challenges you think we're going to need to overcome?
I think the direction we're headed, which I'm really excited about, is the role that technology is going to play in dementia caregiving to help make things easier for family members and professional caregivers, and also higher quality of life for the person with dementia, maybe even allowing them to age at home longer. I just think that the tech space is growing so quickly with so many cool innovations and gadgets and tools, and hopefully starting to get more and more affordable, that this is going to be a cool direction in the
Yeah.
future for dementia care.
I do too. Yeah. So next year, you'll have to come with Carrie Albers and I to see. Yes, we were there this January, and it was really cool to see all the age tech happening and so many innovations. It was like Carrie and I were both like so overwhelmed in a
Yes.
good way, in a good way. Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And finding easy, clear, good ways to get that information out in front of the family members so that family members know these things exist. Because right now they're talking to one another about what monitoring device do you use, and what surveillance thing, like all these things they're talking about, and having them realize and understand what's available, but also, which I can appreciate, things that don't look so medical.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. We don't want the medical bracelet that's very clearly the medical bracelet. We want something that maybe looks like something they would wear as a piece of jewelry. And I'm just excited to see how much growth is happening there.
I do too. Yeah, there's definitely a focus on that too, or more aware, more conversation momentum is happening. So that's really exciting.
Yes.
It is. So you have so many great resources. Can you share with us all the ways that you support families, and not only families, but professionals that are caring for people living with dementia, which is, I think, an amazing dual-sided approach. And what I found is that there's this disconnect at times with the care economy and family caregivers and bringing that together. So I love that intersection that you provide as well.
Yeah, it is a huge dream of mine. It feels like A lot of times, especially when a family member moves to a care facility, it can feel like the family member and the professional staff are at odds against one another. And, the staff always feels like the family's interfering and the family feels like the staff's not doing enough. And I would love a way to help foster. And part of what I do is we all have the same end goal to give the person with dementia the best quality of life and keep them safe. So we all have the same goal. How can we come together and do this in a way that supports one another? Helps everybody know we all are on the same team and everybody has value and something to contribute. That's a huge goal of mine. People can learn more about us by going to our website, careblazers.com. And there's a section there for family members, a section there for professionals. We have a YouTube channel with hundreds of free training videos about all kinds of topics. We let the audience, by the comments and questions they leave under the videos, that's what determines what our next video is going to be about. We sometimes invite experts to come on and share their experiences and insights. So that's all available. Just go to YouTube and search Careblazers. That's fine. More for professional resources, they could just email us info@careblazers.com and we'll be able to help them, point them in the right direction of how we could help them in those situations. But for the most part, we just try to make everything as easy as possible to find online. Just by putting in Careblazers into the Google bar, things should pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the care courses, and I receive your newsletter, the Dementia Dose, which has been, I love it. It comes to my inbox. I'm able to see what is happening, what's current, what info you're providing. So many good ways.
Yeah, they can join the Dementia Dose weekly newsletter by going to the website. We also have a Careblazers survival guide. We have a version for spouses and partners, a version for non-spouse, non-partner, as well as a veteran version if you're a veteran. It's over 60 pages of just what we would consider our foundational teachings and trainings. Again, go to our website and you'll be able to download that for free.
So fun. Thank you.
Yeah,
We'll have
so
to
much fun.
continue the conversation. And I know you're one person that when I am talking with families, I always direct them your way. So appreciative of that. And yeah, looking forward to continually learning from you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Are you looking for more support and community? We sure are. That is why I'm so happy to highlight one of my favorite podcasts in the caregiving community, Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, hosted by my friends and sisters, Natali Elliott Handy and JJ Elliott Hill. They offer a unique blend of personal storytelling, expert advice, and candid conversations that shed light on the real-life challenges and triumphs that caregivers face. Tune in to Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver wherever you enjoy your podcasts or explore more on their website at www.confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.